Much, Mark, and thank you to the Congressional Institute for all of their hard work in hosting us for this annual working retreat. Yesterday, you heard from some of our leadership team and the chairs of the task forces. Today, you're going to hear from the rest of our leadership team. You will see a unified Republican Party and a laser focus on issues that matter to every American. Over the past year, Americans have suffered crisis after crisis due to Joe Biden and House Democrats' failed far-left leadership. And as I said, House Republicans have never been more united in our efforts to earn the majority so that we can deliver results for the American people. When I ran for conference chair about a year ago, I had three main goals. Number one, deliver a laser-focused, disciplined, unified message focused on key issues that are important to voters. Number two, to go on offense against the far-left socialist Democrat policies every single day. And number three, to empower all of our incredibly talented members. And we have done just that in the House Republican Conference. Meanwhile, House Democrats have continued to fail American families, and the people across this country are hurting. The proof is in the polling. 63% of voters disapprove of President Joe Biden's handling of inflation. 52% of voters blame Democrats for rising crime. 66% of likely midterm voters disapprove of President Biden's handling on immigration issues. 77% of voters, including 67% of Democrats, believe Biden should prioritize American energy production. In fact, on every single top issue important to voters, Republicans are leading in the polling. We have been hard at work to develop real solutions that improve the lives of the American people, thanks to the Republican task forces put together by leader Kevin McCarthy. And when we earn back the majority, Republicans will be ready to govern on behalf of the American people on day one. Now, I'm really excited for you to hear from the rest of our leadership team, who I have the privilege of working with every single day. I'm going to turn it over to the conference vice chair, Mike Johnson.
Thanks so much, Elise, and thanks to all of you for being here. We are excited to get together. We've been looking forward to this for some time. And as you know, there is going to be a big contrast. There is. Everyone can see it. As Elise noted, the polling indicates that. What all of us know intuitively, having been home in our districts and talking to people all across this country who are so deeply frustrated. And there's one truth really that stands out here, and it's really simple and clear for everybody to see. The American people gave the Democrats a chance, and what we have seen very clearly now is that they just simply cannot govern. And this week, as Elise said, is about preparing the Republican agenda so that when the American people give us that opportunity again, we will govern and we will be ready. When we say the Democrats can't govern, that is quite literally what we mean. I made a list this morning of just a few things that are going wrong right now. The tax return checks are delayed. Retail crimes are going unprosecuted. Many children are still not in school at 5 days a week now, still, even though the pandemic is in the rearview mirror. The Capitol complex remains closed to our constituents. Democrats dial into committee hearings, often while on vacation. We have some colleagues who quite literally did not return to the Capitol complex for an entire year to vote in person. They used proxy instead. And in fact, to this day, there are many Democrat offices on Capitol Hill, and many of you who work on the Hill know this, you can attest to it, they remain shuttered with the lights off during working hours. I mean, they just can't be trusted anymore to fulfill even their most basic responsibilities. So job number one for Republicans will be to actually make the government work for the people again. This is not rocket science. The government offices need to be open and working like the average hardworking American families have to do. They have to go to work. Government should as well. Schools ought to be open every day, not 3 or 4 days a week, but 5 days a week. Law enforcement should be supported, and our laws need to be enforced and not ignored. We've been seeing the opposite of all that right now. When Democrats can be bothered to come to work, of course, what we get from them, they spend their time doing PR control. All these crises that they have created, you know, the sky-high cost of living now, the cost of goods, the illegal immigration at this disastrous level that we're facing right now, and all the negative ramifications that come from that. Rising crime in all of our cities and record drug overdoses, and most tangibly that we're hearing right now from everywhere, everyone, and all of us feel it, is skyrocketing gas prices. Instead of getting to work to solve all these problems, Democrats are content to try to manage the fallout with political spin. But nobody's buying it. We can see with our own two eyes. We feel the pain acutely, and there's no amount of political handiwork that can make that go away. On inflation, for instance, they said they started to try to tell us a couple months ago it was just transitory. And then the spin changed, the message changed. Then they said it was only affecting the wealthy. And then the message changed again. They blamed it on the grocery stores. They said it was the grocery store's fault. Now, of course, it's Vladimir Putin's fault. No one is buying this. This is what we say on our side all the time. Narrative control is not a governing strategy. Instead of excuses, Americans need solutions. So Elise mentioned the 7 task forces. They've been working very hard. We're here this week to pull all of that together. We will be formulating a grand plan, so to speak, to roll out to the American people, and we're all very, very excited about that. We're going to be ready on day one to begin reversing all this damage that's been done, that will have been done now in 2 years, before the people give us the opportunity to govern again. We'll be ready. We're excited about it, and we can't wait. I want to yield next to the gentleman from North Carolina, our House Republican Conference Secretary, Richard Hudson. You got it.
Well, good morning. I'm Richard Hudson. Jake, it seems like just yesterday you went to the first Republican conference 37 years ago. Can you believe it? It's hard to believe that much time's passed. Appreciate this opportunity to speak to you. So as part of my job as conference secretary of this Congress, I've been implementing a policy that Leader McCarthy created called Hitting the Ground Running. We've worked with all 45 of our freshmen, help them get their offices up and running, getting their operations going in a comprehensive way that's never been done before. And we really focused on constituent communications and getting the mail out on time and a lot of key metrics that govern an effective office. And I'm proud of the results. And we learned yesterday in some of our briefings that on the political side, our freshman class is better prepared than any freshman class through their fundraising, through their activities back home. And so I'm really proud of the work we've been doing as a conference to support these freshmen. We know that their re-elections is one of the keys to us taking this majority back. I'll just comment a little bit about the project we're working on today, our commitment to America. You know, this is a couple of things. Number one, it's unique. In the past, several members would write our contract with America or whatever it was called each time. But this is a conference-wide project where every member of our conference is involved and engaged on a task force. And everyone has buy-in. And so it's going to make for a better project. It's going to make for a better messaging proposal, but it's also going to help us govern when we take over. And so I'm really excited about it. The other difference, I think, for those of you who went to the Democrat retreat, I think the difference between what we're doing and what they're doing is the Democrats have simply lost touch with the American people. And the issues they're focusing on are not the issues that our constituents back home are worried about. The difference on our side is we understand what men and women back home are going through, what families are going through, whether it's inflation, gas prices, concerns about their children not being in school, concerns about what's being taught in their school. These are all the things that are on the parents' minds and families' minds, and that's what we as Republicans are focused on, and that's why the polling is reflecting the success that we're having, and I believe is a big reason why we're going to take over this time. So appreciate y'all being here, and look forward to hearing your questions. Thank you. And now I'll turn it over to our policy chairman, Mr. Gary Palmer of Alabama.
Thank you. Where we are right now in our country reminds me of where we were 40 years ago when I think there was a misery index. And what we're dealing with now with this leadership in the Democrat Party and the Biden administration is a party of misery. And, you know, they keep blaming the rising gas prices on Putin's war. But the fact of the matter is, and we handed out some cards there, if you look at that, you'll see that gas prices were already increasing at a rapid rate 6 months before Putin invaded Ukraine. But the other side of the card shows you what was happening in the Consumer Price Index. I would like for him to explain that. You know, my colleague Mike said that they're the party of narrative, not the party of solutions. And I think you have to look at the data. You have to look at the facts, and the facts don't support their narrative. In the last year, because of inflation, which is at a 40-year high, real wages, hourly wages fell 2.6%. Real weekly wages fell 2.3%. And what does that mean? The Democrats want to focus on the price of a gallon of gas at the pump, but they're not translating what they've done in terms of inflation to the price of a gallon of milk in the grocery store. At every level, whether it's food, clothing, inflation is having an impact. There was a report yesterday, an article yesterday, that indicated that retailers who cater to the middle income families are having to cut prices because people have stopped buying the goods. They can't afford them. And at some point, they're going to hit a point where they can't stay open. 64% of Americans, according to another report, say that they're living paycheck to paycheck. This all started with day one of the Biden administration when he made a decision to stop construction of the Keystone XL pipeline. That pipeline would be within months of completion had they not stopped it. We would be bringing in 830,000 barrels of Canadian oil instead of 600,000 barrels of Russian oil. Energy prices would be lower. Overall inflation would be lower. They followed that by suspending or nullifying the leases that had already been legally let out to energy companies. And that added to the future price of energy, immediately causing prices to go up. And then they come in with this $1.9 trillion package, the American Recovery Plan, that simply caused inflation to skyrocket. They flooded the economy with money, and now they're talking about handing out $300 a month to help you buy your gas. That will only make inflation worse. This is a party without legitimate solutions. I want to conclude with one point. If you look at the polling, poll after poll shows that people believe we're headed in the wrong direction. I've seen numbers over 70% think the country's going in the wrong direction. Among women, the majority think the country's going in the wrong direction. What we're trying to do in forming these task forces and putting together an agenda, it's not just an agenda for the Republican Party, it's an agenda for the nation. We believe that our country still has a bright future. We believe that we can be more prosperous, we can be more secure, and we can be more hopeful. That's why we're here today, to talk about the things that we believe will make our country more prosperous, more secure, and more hopeful. And with that, I'll yield back to our conference chair, Representative Stefanik.
Thank you so much, Gary. I'm going to run through the agenda today, and then I'm happy to take questions. We're going to hear from each of our task force leaders who will put forward their solutions for a more secure and prosperous America. This is following a number of listening sessions that we have been having since the beginning of the year, and every member of the Republican conference is going to have an opportunity to share their views, share their legislative ideas, and share what they're hearing from their constituents. We're kicking off the day with Congressman John Katko. He's the leader of the American Security Task Force, who's been very focused on cyber threats, the crime crisis in America, as well as making sure that we are supporting our law enforcement. We're then going to hear from Patrick McHenry, who's the Republican leader on financial services. His task force is jobs and the economy. Clearly top of the mind issue, particularly with inflation, the energy crisis, and the labor shortage across the country. We'll then hear from Ranking Member Mike McCall, our ranker on House Foreign Affairs Committee. He leads the China Accountability Task Force to talk about Republican proposals to hold the Chinese Communist Party accountable for their malign actions on the world stage. This is building on Mike's exceptional work with the China Task Force, which I was proud to be a member of in the last Congress. We're then going to hear from Kathy McMorris Rogers, the ranking Republican on energy and commerce. She's leading the task force on big tech censorship and data. Then Garrett Graves, our colleague from Louisiana, who leads the Energy, Climate, and Conservation Task Force, and Jim Jordan, the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, who leads the task force on the future of American freedoms, and lastly, Brett Guthrie and Vern Buchanan, who co-lead the Healthy Futures Task Force. For our lunch speaker, we are honored to host via Zoom former U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. We are grateful that she is speaking to us today to share her insight and significant expertise in the face of the national security crisis we face today in the war on Ukraine. And then our keynote speaker for dinner this evening is Vivek Ramaswamy, who's the author of Woke Inc., bestseller, and he not only has a tremendous background as a successful entrepreneur, he, I think, has really hit a chord in sharing with the American people his concerns of the dangers of the far-left woke movement and how to return to a culture of American excellence. And I will be back here today at 11 a.m. for the first ever House Republican Conference Hispanic press conference. It will be bilingual with our Spanish-speaking members, so I'm excited, and I'll see you again shortly. But with that, I'm happy to take questions. Yes?
Hi, you've spoken a lot about, thank you, you've spoken a lot about policies that Republicans want to implement. You've also spoken a lot about inflation and rising gas prices. I'm wondering if you can detail a couple proposals that Republicans are working on, actual legislation that can pass, things that can be done that can bring down inflation and lower gas prices.
Well, number one, we have to rein in the reckless trillions of dollars of spending. That stops with a Republican majority in Congress. You saw that in the previous Congress when we focused on, for example, COVID relief bills. Those bills passed nearly unanimously. That is not what we've seen under Speaker Pelosi's leadership in this term. The hallmark package that Democrats pushed through was the American Rescue Package. That was trillions and trillions of dollars on top of the already unspent billions of dollars of COVID funds. So reining in the spending is going to be really important, making sure that we have a path to balance in our budget and a workable appropriations process rather than having it written behind closed doors, multi-trillion-dollar bills run by the Speaker's office. In addition, on the American energy independence side, there are numerous legislative proposals that have been led by Steve Scalise, by Garrett Graves, by lots of members about how we can unleash all of the above energy independence. And also, there's an oversight role here, too, in terms of holding this administration accountable on their false promises and their attempt to pass the buck when it comes to the energy crisis. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning. Curious, Marjorie Taylor Greene echoed Madison Cawthorn and basically suggesting that Zelensky is a thug or that he's perpetuating propaganda. She holds some power in a section of the base. Is that damaging to Republican messaging that you want to be more hawkish in terms of the Russian invasion of Ukraine?
Well, Putin is an authoritarian. He is committing genocide. He is a war criminal. The House Republican Conference has been consistent in this. We were very honored to have President Zelensky deliver his remarks to a bipartisan House, and it was quite historic. And you saw that in terms of where the House Republican Conference is with the votes we put up on the floor in support of the Ukraine lethal aid package in the defense appropriations bill. So we are unified in strengthening American national security through peace through strength, and that's where the House Republican Conference is. Yes, sir.
Good morning. I'm wondering if you think there's a connection between the American Rescue Plan Act and inflation, because that plan included a lot of tax breaks, including the recovery rebates, child tax credits and whatnot that many Americans said they needed. So I'm wondering if you think there's a direct connection between passage of that bill and inflation.
I do think there is a direct direction, and the American people think there's a direct connection. When you spend trillions of dollars in the economy, you're seeing a significant and historic amount of inflation. That is hurting Americans more than any type of rebates that was included in that bill.
Larry Summers thinks there's a connection.
Yeah, Larry Summers, other Democrat economists, liberal economists also believe there's a direct connection, which was why Larry Summers warned against this as Democrats were trying to pass that bill. Yes, in the back.
Good morning. I just wanted to ask, a lot of the policies that you're talking about this morning would, in order to pass, become law, would require working with President Biden. Is that something that the conference would be willing to do if you retake the majority? And do you think the entire conference will be willing to do that if you retake the majority?
Look, these are the issues that the American people are facing. It is up to President Joe Biden whether his administration is going to be willing to work on those issues. They, frankly, have ignored them. I think we should call out the House Democrats. The fact that the House Democrat conference chair, my equivalent, Hakeem Jeffries, said that inflation didn't come up from a single member, that's how out of touch they are with the American people and the concerns that hardworking families have every every single day who are struggling to balance their budget. They're struggling to fill up their gas tank in a district like mine where people have to travel. It's not rare to drive an hour to work and an hour home in rural America. So people are hurting, and we're going to send legislation. We're going to pass legislation out of the House and send as much as we can to President Joe Biden's desk, and we hope that he will work with us. But the American people understand that this is a result of his failed agenda. Yes.
So there's obviously a lot going right for Republicans right now, but what do you think is the biggest mistake that Republicans can make between now and November?
I think complacency. We are going to work to earn this majority. Majorities are not given, they are earned, which is why as conference chair, I have laser focused our messaging on the issues that actually impact people day to day. The issues that we hear from our constituents every time we go home to our districts, which every single day I'm in touch with constituents. And I cannot tell you the sticker shock they see when they go to the grocery store, or they go to the gas pump, or they pay their heating bill. For seniors like mine in my district, those are really tough financial decisions that they're having to make. So complacency, and I will tell you what, I always say I always outwork my opponents, and every opponent that I've faced knows that in my district, and we're going to work hard to earn this majority, which is why you're seeing a substantive discussion today with every member involved on behalf of their district to develop this agenda. Thanks very much. I'll see you at 11.